historians for a long time, right? And if I give you another clue, you might get it. So let's just say this guy lived in the 1600s. So, and he's not Catholic. So there you go. Oh, come on, Anne, give it a guess who this guy is. Richard, any ideas?
Calvin?
No, not Kelvin Klein. Right, no.
Luther? Martin?
No,
it wouldn't be Luther.
Right, let me give you another clue, right? He wrote one of the most important books on the history of the world, and it was published in 1650. I'll give you one more clue, right? He was a great fan of Oliver Cromwell, and Oliver Cromwell was a great fan of him because of the way he talked about history. Okay, he was a Bishop of Armagh, and the All Primate of Ireland.
They're all, yeah, I know.
Bishop Ussher, yes.
Bishop Ussher.
Oh, yeah, I thought you had a clue then. Who the hell do you think I meant?
No, it's not. It's a little bit after the era that I did at school, really. I mean, medieval kind of history. But yeah, I mean, this is becoming very popular now to know about Ireland, Northern Ireland, the Northern Ireland Protestantism.
But the thing is, right, that aside, Anne and Richard, I got to remember Richard is with us today.
They're
right?
very intellectual.
Yeah, Bishop Ussher is who gave us that chronology based on the Old Testament. And that chronology told us that the earth was founded in the year 4004 BC, 4004 years BC.
Right.
Now, when I did Bishop Ussher last night, right, I won't repeat any of this later. I had two classes basically in one. I had one class because there was 10 of us last night. One was away. I think it was split down the middle. 5 of them thought what I taught them for a whole hour and 20 minutes was so bloody boring and dull, right? And the other half thought it was one of the a really important lecture, right? And then after that, I did a lecture on the Neolithic period, and I said, look, we've got to get back into the Neolithic period because that's what we're supposed to be doing, right? Because what we've done, we've looked at reconstruction archaeology, which is obviously very important to us now when we're following the line with Tim Ingold. And that's what we've been doing. And we've talked a little bit about the barrow diggers and how the barrow diggers may have distorted the line with the way they've looked at history, or have they? And Bishop Ussher is no such exception to that. So I think what we need to do is not to take too much away from the lecture after 7:15. But what we've got to do is try to understand if what Bishop Ussher was doing is distorting the understanding of Tim Ingold's chronology, right? So what we need to do is, this is a very short lecture now, but what we need to do, that's one of his publications, right? But it's what it was printed in Latin first, right? And then it was printed in English, right? So there we go, the annals of the world, right? And that's obviously not that's in Latin, right? So that's the direct translation. So the one thing about Bishop Ussher is his chronology. Now, I'm gonna say something that might be really controversial, right? When you're following Tim Ingold's line, right, Bishop Ussher's idea of the world follows it quite closely, right? Because what Bishop Ussher is doing, the difference with Bishop Ussher is his dates, right? So in other words, the earth was created, and it was 4,004 years till the birth of Jesus Christ, right? However, Bishop Ussher argues that Jesus may have actually been born 4 years before the accepted date of when Jesus Christ was born, which was the first of, which is 1 AD, right? Anno Domini. However, we don't need to discuss that, and the reason why we don't need to discuss that is that what Bishop Ussher was telling us is there's a direct chronology, right? So what we don't have in the Bible is computers, and then the Second World War, and then David, and then aliens, and then where we are today. What I'm trying to get at is the chronology is correct, but the dates are completely wrong, right? So when say for example, we look at that Genesis, and we'll do this in more detail later, but Adam lived 930 years, and Adam fits in with this sort of the idea of Genesis, right? The book of Genesis, we're all aware of that, the book of Genesis in the Old Testament, right? But it's also said that in creation, obviously we know creation was 6 days, and on the seventh day God sat on his backside and did nothing, or whatever way you want to interpret it. But in those like 6 days, everything happened, including dinosaurs, right? Now you might have a smirk on your face and say, well, dinosaurs took millions of years. However, we're still saying the dinosaurs existed. Now that's really, really important. The dinosaurs, to Bishop Ussher, dinosaurs existed, right? They weren't figments of the imagination, they actually occurred, right? And whether you want to go further and say dinosaurs lived on the earth the same time as human beings, that's taken it a bit too far, which is what Jehovah's Witnesses believe. However, when we think about chronology, i.e. dinosaurs came before humans, and then you've got the development of humans, and then you've got the Great Flood, and then you've got the Romans and all the rest of it, right? That Tim Ingold does it follows nicely with what Tim Ingold is doing, following the line, right? So what we are saying is that and this is not me from a high saying, you know, that everything in the Bible is correct, but chronologically, things in the Bible seem to be in the right chronological order. Somewhere you've got the pharaohs, don't you? So you've got all that type of stuff. So the one thing that I as an archaeologist can sort of say is that the dates are wrong, but the chronological order isn't. Now this is basically following the line, and the big thing that came up yesterday when we were looking at Bishop Ussher and his chronology, the big thing that we come up with yesterday was that one of the writers wrote about Bishop Ussher, and we'll say this later if we actually got time, because it's quite a long lecture, but I'll obviously water it down later on. He basically said, well, actually, Bishop Ussher was up against, he was of his time. So in other words, he based everything of his time on, for example, the published work that was there, right? So Genesis and the Bible and all these other things that people are saying, right? One thing that is, so what we're going to do, we're going to just go through all these. We can look at all these in detail later on, but this here, well, one thing I am going to say is that one thing I am going to say, right, and you both of you can turn off at this point, is that the events in the Old Testament, you know, the Babel, and then you look at Sodom and Gomorrah. You know, they're starting to think that Sodom and Gomorrah actually existed, right? The pharaohs, they existed, right? All these things are in the Old Testament, right? That Noah's flood, well, we know that happened, right? Doggerland, you know, that's one example of Noah's floods. We know all these things existed. We know there's an order to these things, right? So archaeologists, biblical archaeologists, almost go out to try to prove the Bible, right? Other people argue that you know, the Bible's all made up, but it's not. It's not, because what he's then denying is that the pharaohs, you know, the exodus out of Egypt, Akhenaten, and all these things, right? So interesting enough, and Anne, you know me very well. In that, I don't dismiss the Bible, right? You should have known that by me more than ever, right? What we have done is sometimes in lectures we've basically said, Akhenaten, the city of Akhenaten, is this was Akhenaten actually Moses? You know, when he took his people out of Egypt, and his people, the chosen people, went to the Holy Land. You know, and all these. Well, that's an interpretation. That's not exactly, but one clear thing as well is that in history, when we follow the line, right, and we try to slot these things into it, sometimes, even though you're slotting things into it, the date range is completely different, but they are in chronological order, right? That's the point. Now, when we're not going to do the contents of this a minute, because it's quite funny, but but there is a seriousness about this. In many ways, what Bishop Ussher was trying to do was make sense of the evidence, right, and not ignoring the evidence. So actually, Anne, right, I'm going to challenge you a minute. Is there anything in the Old Testament that you disagree with? Give me something.
Oh God. Well, now it's hard, isn't it? Hard to find something that hasn't been challenged already and excavated and that sort of thing.
So I'll put this out to Richard. Anything in the old? We're not doing Bible bashing now, right? But anything you can think of, Richard, top of your head.
Well, Jonah and the whale.
Okay, and explain Jonah and the whale.
I don't know what you mean. Whether right. Well, Jonah. Well, I think he must have done something wrong, because.
And can I just say this? Sorry for the language. No shit.
No what?
Sorry, I just said no shit. Of course he did something wrong.
Well, he did something wrong, and I can't remember what it was. But anyway, he went on a boat to run away from, you know, the authorities, or God, I think he was trying to run away from. And they threw him overboard because they thought he was a Jonah, you know, that idea that he's going to bring misfortune on them. And he was thrown into the sea. And
then he ended up in a whale.
He miraculously ended up in a whale's stomach. Yeah. And so he was saved, you know.
But the thing is, right, okay, Richard's got a good point. We're not going to argue whether that's factual or not.
Yeah.
But I could come back at this and say, okay, we're not going to argue whether this is factual or not. Right? But what we can say is that maybe an event like that happened, but it didn't happen exactly in that way, that somebody was in a whale and all the bloody rest of it, right? But then again, it might be possible. But anyway, right, we're not going to do that. But what we're talking about is chronology, right? chronological order, right? And you know, when we, interesting enough, trying to make sense of the world, trying to make sense of what's around you, is what Tim Ingold has actually done with his line. So say for example, this will come up later on, but obviously the point is we've got Adam. There's Adam, right? Now, strangely enough, if we think about Adam, right, and if the Earth was created 404 years BC, right? I'm struggling to try and work out why Adam is comes in there at 4111, but I think this is actually from the present time or something like that. I'm really not sure what's going on with the dates here. But what we can see is that somebody's trying to make order. That's the point. Somebody's trying to make order of the chronology, right? And when you've actually got order of the chronology, then it's a bit like following anything. As long as things are in order, right? As long as things can be read properly, as long as things can actually be understood, then whenever they happened, for example, you know, I'm actually writing on my website about my acting stuff over the years, right? And I'm actually quite surprised the amount of stuff that I did before start 2011, right? But even then, I actually struggle trying to fit things into sort of a chronology. That's in my own life, right? So, but they did happen. They actually did happen. So what we're trying to get at is that whenever this flood occurred, right, however this flood occurred, right, we know that there's evidence of a flood. You've got Gilgamesh, you've got the flood in the Bible with Noah, you've got the flood, for example, of Doggerland. There are different. Yeah, go on.
I think this is a good idea. I think what he did was a good idea.
Well, actually, Anne, I feel really, really guilty because my lecture yesterday was really dismissive. It was no, and it was not dismissive in the point that I was dismissing it. It was dismissive in the point that the literature was dismissing it, right? So at the end, I just thought, right, we're going to do the next bit of the lecture because I was trying to keep everybody happy and do another lecture. And then somebody defended Bishop Ussher, and I thought that's actually should be my job, right? And actually, I was happy that they defended Bishop Ussher. And but one thing that I should have done with Bishop Ussher is actually said, well, he had all these dates and things, right? He put things into chronological order. No, I'm not saying that Adam lived 930 years, right? I'm not saying his son Seth lived 912 years. I'm not actually saying that, right? But what I am going to say is that maybe these are all sort of, there's some chronology to these, right? And then you've got this sort of idea of Moses here. Now this is an interesting one, right? Moses, and the date is 1526, right? Now that's really interesting, right? And what we're going to do there, right, is what we're going to. I'm just going to play with your minds a minute, right? We're gonna type in Arca. I can't even spell it, and I'll just spell Arcatartan.
I've
got it, Anne. I've got it. I've actually. Oh, hang on a minute. Well, I have to do it again. Right. Let's just. So we got A K H.
Oh yeah. Oh God. We need Bill. AH.
We've got it. I've actually right. Amana. Yeah, the Amana period. Right. Arcanart. No, Arcan. Right. Right. Arcanarton. Right. The city of Arcatartan. Right. Okay. Here we go. So we put in king there. Right. I'll get it right. Hang on. King. King. There's a point to be made with this. So you've got the date on there. Right. So interesting enough. So if we think the chronology's out, That chronology to me seems to be out, but by
Yeah.
a little bit. However, Akhenaten disappeared roughly around 1336. 1336, right? And on that chart, it says 1526, right? So what we've got to do, if Adam, right, we've got a chronological problem with Adam, right? So what we've got to do, we've got to put Adam as being born in 4004, not 411. So therefore, what we do, we carry 7, right? So what we do, what do we do? Do we add 7 onto 1526, or do we take it away? So if we're pushing the dates back, oh no, we are pushing. Is that does 1526 actually become 1533? Is that right?
Yeah.
So I hope that's right, because Akhenaten, right, disappears in the year 1336 BC, right? Hang on, no, he doesn't. Hang on, I gotta do something here. There's something wrong with my dates on here. Because hang on, if we put Tutankhamun in here, Richard's glazing over a minute. Tutankhamun, right? The Amarna period, and Tutankhamun was right. Yeah, it is right. So basically, we're 200 years out with Akhenaten, right? We are actually 200 years out. However, but the thing is, that date 33, right? And Akhenaten disappearing in 36. There's only 3 years out. So if you put 200 there, what I'm trying to get at, right? If you look at this chronology, right, and dates are wrong here and there, right? It could be very possible that Moses is in fact Akhenaten. Do you see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Because
Well, yeah, I mean, we don't know, do we? Because I don't know who wrote history, but you know, they were different people that wrote the Bible.
there were different people who wrote the Bible and put different dates in there.
Yeah, and
But
I mean,
yeah, go on.
if the Bible is like poetry, you know, I mean, I suppose there are a lot of facts, you know, there's sort of like big stories in it, you know, that must have some facts to them, you know.
Yeah.
And then, you know, people have tried to ascertain the history, or you know, through what we know and what the archaeologists have found, you know, and it's quite you know, it's quite difficult to sort out the facts from the myths, but I think chronology is something that can help.
So you know, if we go back to the line with Tim Ingold, right? Yeah. And say for example, these dates are all wrong, right? Which they probably are. No, they've got to be wrong, right? Because nobody says that Adam lived 930 years, right? However, if all the dates are wrong, but all the people on the list are in that chronological order, right? Which there's no reason why they shouldn't be. That means that the layers are correct.
Yeah.
Except the dates are wrong. And the other thing as well is what we're talking about, the Tim Ingold work and Bruegel and the Harvester, right? Is that's an interpretation. Can it also be argued that the Bible is also an interpretation of the facts?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So what we are saying is in many ways, and this is a key point, right? Do you know, Anne, when you're teaching people and they come back and you said, this is what you said, and I said, yeah, that's what I said, and you're right, right? It reminds me of when I was teaching my Lampeter class. And by the way, the reason why I stopped teaching my Lampeter class, I had 13 people in it, and the reason why I stopped teaching it was that I didn't need to teach that class anymore, because the only reason I was teaching it was to actually pay Jessica's wages.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was a very successful class, but I thought, right, I don't need to teach this class now to pay her wages, right? So I stopped teaching it, right? Which I don't really regret, but one thing that I do regret is that I was making so much progress with the individuals in that class, right? So this is why I had to explain what I've just explained with the class of Jessica and all the rest of it. So and the reason why that was what happened, because I was making real progress, and there was this one girl in the class, right? She was like 17, and this new guy come into the class called David, and this and David was going on about dates, like this, dates like this, and I think it was a biblical thing we were talking about at the time, and she actually turned up and she stood up in the room and she said, actually, dates don't matter.
Oh.
And I turned around and said, yeah, David, dates don't matter. Because the problem is with history, as opposed to archaeology, history, you're restricted by dates, right? And for example, when we're looking at the Neolithic period, for example, what we do see with the Neolithic period is that there's a broad range between when people say the Neolithic began and so on. But what I've done with my Neolithic is sod the dates, everyone, right? My Neolithic began as soon as Britain became an island. That's great. I've got a beginning and an end, and that's what you should do, right? Because what characterizes the end of the Paleolithic period and the beginning of the Mesolithic period? What's the one event that makes the Paleolithic, the old, to the Mesolithic, which is the middle? What's the one event that we use?
The water bridge. When
No, the melting of ice.
the melting of ice.
So in other words, some say, for example, right, some argue, Anne, that 12,000 years ago the ice melted, right, and that's the end of the Ice Age, right, and that's the end of the Paleolithic period, and then we're into the Mesolithic period. Other people say, oh, it's 14,000 years ago, right, and then they say the Mesolithic period begins. But Anne, there's two things that both of those schools of thought have in common. It's the end of the Ice Age, which brings on the Mesolithic period. So therefore, that means that you've got to have something that ends the Mesolithic period, an event that ends the Mesolithic period. And it's Britain becoming an island. Job done. Brexit is job done. What we do in history, we use events rather than dates to clarify happenings, right? Okay, for example, I can brag and say, right, the 14th of October 1066, the Battle of Hastings, right? But it's not the date that's important. It's actually King Harold being killed at the Battle of Hastings, which changes everything. It's not the date. It's not the time. It's not 4:15 on a Wednesday afternoon that changes history. It's an actual event. So, and it's like, people get really thingy about the tsunami of the 20th of January, 1606. Or was it the tsunami of the 30th of January, 1607, right? And one's the Gregorian, one's the Julian calendar, right? And you're just thinking, well, actually, when you get obsessed with people get sort of obsessed with this date thing with the tsunami, right? And it actually detracts from the archaeology and the history and the archaeological dating, right? And but both of those dates, the same thing happens, right? It's just the dates. All they are is dates. They're just time, right? So the one and on Bruegel's Harvester, is there actually a date on it? Does it actually say this happened in 1556? It doesn't. It says this happened. It doesn't actually tell you when this happened. It doesn't actually, but you can get an idea what's going on. It's an event that's happening in the picture, right? And that's, you know, when people go to school, right, they don't, most people don't remember the date of when the Second World War ended. Well, it didn't end on the 8th of May 1945. It actually ended on the 2nd of September 1945 with the Japanese defeat, right? But the war ended in Europe on the 8th of May 1945. But the fact of the matter is, what's important is that the war ended, right? And basically the end of the Second World War in Europe is the Germans surrendering, but they didn't surrender on the Channel Island, I think, until about the 16th of May. They didn't actually give. I think it was the I think it was the 16th of May. But what I'm trying to get at is that there was an end. Whenever the Second World War ended, it ended at different times in different parts of the world, but it did end. That's the end of the Second World War. That means that after that, right? That means after that, there's something different. So what I'm trying to get at is that history is not about dates. It's about events. And I think history has been taught so wrongly when people sort of get very obsessed with dates and not events. Do you know what? I could probably here we go. I can give you the direct date of when the Germans surrendered. It was +8. So in other words, they actually surrendered. Is it +8? No, it's not. Oh, they actually surrendered on the 12th of May, right? So it's +4, right? 12th of May +4. This is when they surrendered on the Channel Islands, right? But in other words, they did surrender. However, the point is that it was the end of the war in Europe, but the end of the war in Europe was at different dates, and the end of the war in the world was at different dates, right? And for that poor little, mind my French, I'm going to say it as it is, for that poor little bastard who was caught in the Borneo forests, and he was still there in 1945, 1975 or whatever it was, right? That Japanese bloke, right? But the main thing is that for him, the war was still being fought up until when he actually surrendered to. He actually had to meet his commanding officer. His original commanding officer went out. I think it was 1975. It was definitely the 1970s. And his commanding officer went out and had to say, actually, we've surrendered. And the guy said, oh, all right, then I'll surrender as well. But what we're getting at, what the whole point is that the line does not follow dates. It follows events and happenings. And the final thing that we're going to say for following the line and Tim Ingold, right? And I actually wrote to Professor Tim Ingold a little while back, and he only retired very recently, and he's professor and emerite professor, and I basically said, I said, can you help me with something? And he said, oh, actually, I've just retired. I'm not doing it anymore. So it's a bit of a shame, but one of the stark realities is that history is to be followed on a line, is to be followed with events. It's not to be followed on dates. So we followed the line for months upon months upon months, and that's the conclusion. Everything that we've looked at is events, not dates. History should be marked with events and not dates, because the events and the happenings are following the line. And the final thing as well is, what dates do is preclude the transition and intermingling of the line and this great web, right? You get rid of the dates and everything flows nicely, and that's exactly what's going on here. So what we're going to do, we're going to call it a day now with our Wednesday classes at 6 o'clock. This is the last one today, but we are going to be starting in a few moments at 7:15. So I'm going to have a little bit of a break, and what I'm going to say now, guys, is there any questions?
No, no.
No.
Well, I think it helps to say that it's events and not dates.
Yes.
It's always
And look, the point I was trying to make, Anne, right, is that you can probably remember lots of things in your life, right, but you probably can't remember the dates. It's the same as me.
Absolutely true. I mean, I know that the war ended on VJ night because my mother and father met on VJ night in September. It was
September the 2nd, yeah.
Yeah, and they were dancing in the street in Glasgow, and because the sailors had come back, they'd come
Yeah.
back from Japan, the Pacific,
Yeah.
and their war was over. They were rejoicing. So I got confused when they were talking about victory over Europe. And
But you shouldn't get confused, Dan. It's the end of the war.
well,
That's
it's
all
the
you need to
same
remember.
year,
It's
isn't
not the
it? I
date.
mean,
It's the
it's
end of the war. Exactly.
inevitable. It's going to take a while for all the world to become peaceful.
So what we're going to and I'm going to say something very controversial. The war in Ukraine started in 2014. It did not start last year. That war's being fought. But we're told continually by the media that it began 2014, while Ukraine has been at war with Russia over the Ukraine since 2014. So but the point is, if you take away the dates, then we can say there's this border dispute between Ukraine and Russia, and it's been going on for all this time, right? That's actually an event. We don't need the dates. The dates cloud the actual narrative. People are dying. People are losing their lives on both sides, right? That's the reality. I don't give a stuff about dates.
Yeah.
Right. So, anything you'd like to say, Richard, before I have a little break?
No.
Right. Okay,
Go along
guys.
with that.
What's that?
I said I'll go along with that.
Yeah.
Okay, then. So what we're
I'm
going
gonna
to
have
do?
a cup of tea now.
Yeah, good. So what we're going to do, I'm going to stop this recording now. Anyone who does see this when it does go out, don't forget to like and subscribe. So I would like to say that next week there is no 6 o'clock, and what we are going to be doing is that Rona will be sending a letter to Bill, because if we send him a letter, he knows, so he can't complain. So
Right.
next week it's going to be 7:15 on a Wednesday, and Anne, you can join us at 11:30 in the morning on Wednesday, and you're very welcome. So if there's no other questions, we'll end this recording and we'll come back on 7:15. But you guys stay there. I'm just going to end the recording. So I'll be back in 5. Take care.
Okay, bye.
Yeah.
We'll see you in a minute, Anne. Take care.
Bye.
And you, Richard. I'm just going to end the recording. Hang on.